Look, I apologize. A little bit of a cold and a little bit of overuse of my voice today. Senator Pat Brown wanted to join me here for this, and I thank you for joining us here tonight at a little bit of a late hour. I have a bit of a statement I'd like to go through, and after the statement, I'll invite Pat to say a few words, and I'll be more than glad to answer questions. When the statute of limitations bill discussion began this session, I sponsored Senate Bill 261, which the Senate unanimously passed in February of 2017. This important measure was sent to the House of Representatives and changed the statute of limitations for child sexual abuse for civil and criminal lawsuits prospectively. The bill also contained language that stated a retroactive window was unconstitutional. The House failed to act on Senate Bill 261 for nearly 20 months. If anybody wants to count, that's 601 days. It was not until the Attorney General's grand jury report was released and they took any action. We've had the bill for 21 days, and I can assure everybody we have been working every one of those 21 days. Last month, the House amended my bill, but it included only 2 of the 4 grand jury recommendations. It was a seriously flawed bill, largely because it established that some victims would be treated better than others. And quite frankly, this bill for victims, all victims, is a disaster. After serious deliberation, I moved my position, and I announced my support of the compensation funds to ensure that victims would receive some healing. I was instantly met with opposition, saying it wouldn't work. Following my conversations with the administrator of the New York compensation funds, I was convinced that not only does it work, it works very well. I remain convinced it would give victims healing and compensation without the uncertainty of litigation. Nevertheless, I kept working, we kept working. I spoke with many members of my caucus who, like me, believe that a retroactive statute of limitation changes would violate the remedies clause in our Constitution. And I must pause and say that this view is not an argument of convenience. I have believed it since the issue started 3 years ago. Over the last month, I have continued to look for common ground, but none of the other sides have been willing to compromise. I heard the victims who I met with and those who came to the Capitol and continuously repeated that they wanted to face their abuser in court. They said it to me publicly, they said it to me privately. We want to face that abuser and have our day in court. I reached out and I met with Representative Rossi on several occasions. Privately, he was for the window, and privately, he was for a compensation fund. And let me say that again. He was for any window and the compensation fund. I kept meeting with him, even though I have been villainized by him in the press, being called what I would call the most undesirable names I can think of. And this debate from him and some of the advocates have become disgusting. You know, I'm a father of 3 children. I lost a child. And to say that I stand with pedophiles is insulting and it's disgusting. Georgia, Utah, and Massachusetts opened a window to allow victims to confront their perpetrator in civil action. Even though I remained unconvinced that such a window is constitutional in Pennsylvania, I moved my position again and said I was willing to support it. And even with those 3 states, they did not have a compensation fund. Pennsylvania, my legislation had a compensation fund. My amendment prepared for today has all 4 of the grand jury's recommendations, including a 2-year window for victims to civilly sue their abusers, has a certification program through PCCD, and evens the playing field by placing all perpetrators of child abuse to be sued on the same level. My amendment also contains a plan to allow funds to be set up by a panel of judges so that victims who wanted to receive compensation could do so. The amendment I proposed today was further than I was comfortable with going. That's what took so much time. But I wanted to find middle ground, and I wanted to negotiate in good faith. Unfortunately, no one else during the past weeks and months decided to move nor negotiate. And so where are we now? We're at a standstill. Let me add that my amendment does not let any organization, including the church, off the hook. They would pay substantially into a fund to make right their horrific sins of the past. A compensation fund would supplement my proposed 2-year window. Quite frankly, I very much wanted to resolve this issue. I very much agreed with Representative Brazi that I believe the two of us could come together and stand together in order to have a bill done tonight. I also don't want any organization to be bankrupt because of a window that would result in victims not receiving compensation. I believe that. That's what's happened in other states, and I remain committed to this issue. I call on those who have a different opinion of mine to offer a proposal. Come to the middle, come to the table. Bring me your ideas rather than simply no to everything that I have put up. Stop hurling harsh, unconstructive words and offer alternatives. Just last week, the Attorney General finally started speaking to me. I haven't seen his counterproposal. Many caucus members make their own decisions, but many of them share my concerns of the bill that came over from the House. And one of the most glaring problems of the House version is that it created 2 classes of victims. My amendment today prepared places for all victims to be on an equal playing field. Abuse is abuse, no matter where it happens. You know, I'm a leader in part because of my willingness to bend and find compromise. I have quietly tried to do that. I have done it very respectfully. I have not hurled names. I have not made accusations. But unfortunately, I'm the only one that has done that. The Attorney General hasn't moved. The House hasn't moved. The governor hasn't moved. They have only thrown arrows at my concessions. And it is my hope that we can find a path forward and provide meaningful changes to help victims. And quite frankly, my amendment was a winner for all, except for the trial lawyers. And at this point, I'd like to ask Pat if you'd like to make a few comments, and then I'll be very glad to take questions.
Just on behalf of the rest of our caucus, I wanted just to commend the pro tempore for what I believe was an unbelievably serious effort over a long period of months to try to come up with a comprehensive proposal for what was an effort to put together a process of healing for the victims who have been part of the conversation and who've been injured throughout the Commonwealth, who've been asking for us to take this very seriously. This was something that we didn't want to just look at in one dimension, but look at it comprehensively. And we believe a process of healing for the victims included, several very important elements. One was accountability, making sure that perpetrators were not ever considered as someone who would not be held accountable criminally for their offenses, taking those recommendations from the grand jury report into account. Being able to face your accuser and facing the pain that has been inflicted on them by people that they trusted at very early ages. Being compensated for the damages they've incurred, but also understanding that a process of healing, a true process of healing, does not include causing unusual pain to others. And that was one of our major concerns about the window, is it doesn't accommodate the collateral damage that could be potentially caused to others who are are trying to seek services from the organizations that are part of this. This is not about institutions. This is about beneficiaries and making sure that we are not spreading the pain to other people. A compensation fund that goes as far as the viability of the organization makes sure that organizations financially are held accountable, but those that are other beneficiaries of those organizations are not also innocent victims of this. That's a more holistic approach. Just opening up a civil process that doesn't include that thought, and I really believe that part of this conversation has not included that as what could happen to people who are beneficiaries and seek services from organizations for schooling, immigrants for services from charities, things that are really important to all of us. That is part of this. So I wanted to just commend the pro tempore for looking at a very comprehensive approach and looking for the opportunity for a real serious conversation about a comprehensive approach to taking care of the victims who've been part of this conversation.
Thanks, Pat. Look, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Is this over for now? Are you holding up the possibility of something coming together in the next couple of weeks?
Look, we're going to recess to the call of the President pro tempore, and whoever is negotiating for the other side, if they want to put down a reasonable counter proposal that I can find 26 votes for in the Senate, I'll bring the Senate back.
Did you
But
ever
that's where we're at now. Sorry,
Did you ever
Mark.
consider putting up for a vote a 2-year window to sue both perpetrators and institutions?
No, Mark. And look, the idea of what I have presented is a 2-year window to sue the perpetrator and a mechanism for these institutions to set up compensation funds. All institutions.
But did that have the votes to pass?
We have the votes to move my amendment that Dave Reed has come out several hours ago and said it was going to be met with a non-concur.
You're saying that can get through the Senate,
Absolutely.
but you're not.
But
passing.
why move a bill? Why move a bill on a product that's going to die in the House now? Look, I haven't had a conversation with Dave Reed or Mike Turzai about this bill. They amended my bill in the House with not even a phone call, not a text, not a, this was my bill. There is mutual respect between the two chambers on, when we begin amending bills. So I find it ironic that I've not had any communication with them. And so the only communication we've had is basically Dave Reed coming out tonight, and saying that my amended bill would be met with a non-concur.
Did that statement cause some consternation within your caucus? People reconsider whether they vote for it because it would just be dead anyway?
Let me say it clear, I'm confident we could have amended that bill in rules, moved it to the floor, and moved it over to the House. The votes are there. But why do it if this is going to be met with a dead end? It was my goal, and those that support this, to get it done. And we were hoping for, I contacted Representative Rossi at 11:12 a.m. today. Let's meet, let's talk. There was no meeting, there was no talking.
Could a 2-year window to sue both perpetrators and institutions have passed the Senate? If it had been
No.
come to the floor?
No.
And I asked because Josh Shapiro said that would pass
No.
if it came to the floor.
I respect the Attorney General, but as a pro tem here, I've learned how to count, and I know how to count. And that's my job here. His job is to be a prosecutor, and my job is to run legislation.
Senator, why not come back tomorrow and continue negotiations on this issue?
I'm negotiating with myself, Angela. I mean, I can sit in my office and write things down and turn them over and spin them around, but that's not negotiating. There's not been one counter proposal against 2 of my proposals. 2 of them. And let's go back to it. Senate Bill 261, as it sets in the Rules Committee, is a terrible piece of legislation. The Attorney General admitted to me that he's 1,000% for putting the other 2 recommendations in. They're not in there. And 2 tiers of victims? Please, somebody tell me how the young boy that's raped by a school teacher or raped by somebody at a Boy Scout camp has a higher burden of proof than raped by a priest? That's unconscionable. My God, what are we doing here if that's what we're all about? I can't be for that.
Would you be for equal tiers at gross negligence?
What we did in this amendment is we put everybody on the same level.
At negligence, however, not gross.
We did not even negligent, it was willful conduct. To take their abuser into court and sue them civilly. So we did that. We've leveled the playing field. Any other questions?
On the retroactivity, the Attorney General has said he believes it's constitutional. Obviously, you guys have just a different opinion. Why not let the courts decide?
Well, because it is our job to decide. It is our job to vote. We already voted. Keep in mind, Senate Bill 261 had a preamble in it that spelled out clearly that a retroactive window was unconstitutional. And I moved into a gray area in what I did in this amendment. Quite frankly, I believe that if you try to put an unconstitutional window similar to what is in 261 now up, it will be ruled out of order. We have already voted that is unconstitutional. And you know, I don't carry the Constitution in my pocket, right? There's people that do, and I respect that. But that's the only oath we take here, to uphold the Constitution. And you know, the losers tonight are victims. And I think we're going to look back, if this doesn't get accomplished in the next couple weeks, I think victims are going to look back. This is a terrible loss for the Commonwealth and for victims.
Victims have been saying in the Capitol the last 2 days, in one form or another, that this seems like you, in your leadership role, have been bending over backward to protect the Catholic Church and the interests of the insurance industry. What is your compelling rebuttal to that?
Well, look, victims in this building are political motivated right now. The victims in this building are being victimized for politics. It is clear to me by statements by the Attorney General and others that this is about elections now, that we're going to throw people out of office that didn't do what we wanted them to do. So it's about elections. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, I take this hit all the time, the litany of, oh my God, Scarnati's for this, he's for that, he's done this, he's done that. Well, I've been here 18 years, and I've stood up to people that nobody else has stood up to. I'm standing up today for victims. I'm standing up for compensation. I'm standing up for a fair, level playing field. And people want to criticize me for that? You know, in this world, we'd all love to get everything we want. I'd love to have every bill that I've ever passed exactly how it was written. But this is a democracy. And in a democracy, we have difference of opinions. And usually we voice those different opinions in a civil way. Usually we'd have a civil debate, but the civil debate is gone. It's over. And the victims in this building are different than the victims back home, because I've met with victims back home. They want to heal. They want to start a process to heal. This process is to inflame the issue, and that is unfair. There's dozens of victims that have been in this building for weeks, but there's hundreds of them that don't want to live this pain in a public forum.
And who don't want the legislature to make that decision for them.
Now, is that a question, or is that your opinion?
This is what they say.
No.
No, I have no, this is what I've heard in 15 years on and off of speaking to victims as a journalist in Philadelphia.
And I've tried to make a decision for them. I have tried harder than anybody. But good God, the bill that we have that came over from the House, let me say it for the 100th time, it is awful towards victims. It is awful.
fact that you have moved on the issue of at least opening a 2-year window shows in his mind that that was always the constitutional argument that you had, that this shows that that was simply an excuse. The fact that you've moved on it, that somehow you now think that this is constitutional.
I don't.
Shows that it was an excuse when you were saying
No.
up until now that it wasn't.
No, I don't.
So then why did you agree to do this?
Because I'm trying to find a compromise. And the 2-year window that I offered, along with a compensation fund, provides both. Go after the institution in the fund, go after the perpetrator in civil court.
But you would have
And it gave it both. Both we have.
But you would have voted for it, correct? You would have voted for
For my own amendment,
For this proposal, yes.
Yes, I would have.
You still think is unconstitutional?
I would have held my nose and I would have voted for it, because I sincerely wanted a compromise.
Were you gonna say something?
I'm sorry.
I want to clarify why the 261 as it stands now would be so bad for victims. I think you were saying this, Senator Brown, when I came in. You were saying that it could, because it could harm churches or institutions like that, it could further victimize.
We're not talking about institutions.
So
We're
can you
talking about
clarify?
beneficiaries. We're talking about people who...
People who benefit from those institutions.
And that is not something we can take lightly here. That we don't want to create a whole class of new victims. We want to compensate folks who have been injured, badly injured, in pain. But we also have to have some balance so that they are compensated as well, up to the point where an institution is not viable to take care of the rest of their beneficiaries. That, for some reason, has been lost in this conversation. No victim wants to heal by causing pain to others. And an open civil process doesn't consider the collateral damages it can do to others. That's always been part of my concern about this. This proposal takes that number all the way. One thing you have to understand about this proposal, most compensation funds don't account for the total amount of money that an institution can afford without causing so much pain to other people. This does that. So if you are not for something like this, your interest in this are taking the beneficiaries out of the equation altogether, where those who provide service to the folks will not be able to do it anymore. There's not a victim who wants to heal who wants to do that. Any victims I speak to, if I offer that as a conversational piece, of course they don't want to do that. But they want to heal as well, and a balanced equation like this makes that happen. And that has, for me, that has not been on the table as far as this conversation. It needs to be.
So you do want to protect institutions so that nobody who relies on those institutions.
I want to protect the beneficiaries.
By doing so, you have to protect
Kids in
institutions.
schools, immigrants that seek Catholic charities who would be thrown back into their countries into bad situations. That's what we're talking about. And there's not a victim in this conversation that I've spoken to, here or back home, who wants to do that. But no one's speaking to that in terms of this civil window, where you can have a judgment that they are not in the courtroom. Those folks are not in the courtroom. And if we want a true process of healing, everyone has to be considered here. So I believe this approach, if you connect the dots, facing the perpetrator, compensating a victim to the point of viability of an institution that's taking care of folks, and making sure there's not a whole lot of collateral damage against other people who are also victimized. That's what this proposal is, and I can't see why there's no serious conversation about it. And I know what the motivation is, as the pro tempore has said. There's no interest in considering other proposals because there are other issues on the table in the middle of October.
Let me just say this, and I'm going to conclude. Look, what's justice? Justice money? Is justice facing your perpetrator? Justice putting somebody behind bars? I think justice means something to everybody differently. But what I can say about justice, my bill brought justice, and it brings healing. And I think that over the last 2 years, now going to 3 years, we're going to have a whole group of victims possibly out there unable to move forward. And I think that's unconscionable. But I'm prepared, and I'll wait for a proposal from whoever's negotiating with me. I'll wait to see who Oz is behind the curtain. And we get a proposal that works for 26 members, I'll bring them back. Thank you very much.